Hi guys, it's Shadow. Uploading high-quality audiobooks for you, it's very time-consuming and hard-working process. So please support me so I can keep uploading for you. This is how. You can donate directly through my PayPal or Ko-fi. You will find links in the description. Or you can subscribe for a tier monthly in my Patreon, where you will find many novels there that can't be published here in YouTube due to copyrights. Or you can make a one-time payment to join a Telegram group for a specific novel. You will find the novels list and the price to join in the description. If you can't support me financially, just like and subscribe our videos. Before our audiobook starts, this is a list of our big donors in our Patreon this month. Thank you guys, your support means a lot. And as always, enjoy Shadow. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 420. An unexpected gain. A few moments prior. Where the hell did she go? Aoife pursed her lips while climbing up the stairs of the dorms. She had been trying to look for Kira the entire time, and this was the second time she had returned to the dorms. If she's not back, then I have no idea where she went. The only other way she would get to meet Kira would be if she waited for her at the confessional hearing. But Aoife didn't really have the time for that. She had to attend her own hearing. In any case, she's not far from my dorms. Sage, you don't listen, do you? A loud voice halted Aoife on the spot. It was an unfamiliar voice, and hearing it, she frowned. Is someone fighting in the dorms? This put her in a little bit of an awkward spot. In order to get to her dorms, she needed to pass directly through the corridor where the voice came from. In fact, on this floor, other than Julian and a few others she knew, there shouldn't be anyone else. So who exactly was screaming? You never have, never did, and never will. The voice continued to shout, the venom and hatred palpable enough for Aoife to feel. I don't know how you managed to fool the entire academy into believing you're some kind of prodigy worth praising. But I know the real you. The real you? Aoife suddenly felt extremely curious. No, I can't do this. Her curiosity was starting to get the better of her. Aoife had to purse her lips tightly to suppress her curiosity. A couple of possibilities ran down her mind. In particular, she was suddenly reminded of one of the thoughts that had been digging into her mind for quite some time. A topic that she chose to deliberately turn a blind on since discovering it. It couldn't be that? Aoife held her breath. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but there was no denying what she saw. What do I do? Aoife paced around the corridor. From time to time, she would peek to glance at Julian's strangely quiet room. However, it was that very quietness that stirred an unsettling feeling within her. He's not going to... What are you doing? Hi up. Aoife jumped up from her spot, almost hitting her head against the wall in front of her. You. With heavy breaths, she looked at Kira, who was looking at her with a frown. The hell? She almost looked offended. I'm not that ugly, am I? No, maybe? No, that's not the point. Where the hell were you? Kira was quiet for a second. Then, glancing at the door of her room, she pointed at it. My room. But I wasn't feeling pretty good, so I was in the bathroom for a while before going there. She then raised her hand to display a small bag that seemed to be filled with medicine. See? Aoife came to an understanding. Then, as if recalling what was happening, she glanced at Julian's door once more. Kira looked at her and frowned. You. She pulled Aoife back. What? Aoife raised her head and saw the serious look on Kira's face. Her seriousness left her unsettled. This was one of the few rare times where she had seen her look so serious. What could it be? Did she figure something out? Aoife almost felt relieved and was just about to speak when Kira talked over her. You can't stop. Can you? What are you? If you're not stalking today, you're stalking tomorrow. And if you're not stalking tomorrow, you're stalking today. What is up with you and your stalking? Aoife blinked her eyes a couple of times. No, TSK. Kira clicked her tongue and shook her head. Before she could get any other word out, Kira turned around and headed for her room. On her way, she mumbled, so creepy. Seriously. Wait. Bang. Linus smashed against one of the walls of Julian's room. His face winced in pain. He tried to resist, but it was useless. He was simply too weak. What exactly did you say you saw? A hand gripped his throat tightly. Yuk. Prevented him from saying anything. Raising his head, a pair of purple eyes met his sight. They were a familiar pair of eyes. They were different in the color he was used to, but that gaze of his, it's the same as in the nightmare. Those cold and crazed eyes. Clench. Something started to boil in Linus' chest. He wanted nothing more than to tear apart the man who stood before him. It was unfortunate that he could do nothing but stare. His brother was simply too strong for him. He could hardly put up any resistance. I like that look of yours, Cage. He was completely overwhelmed by him. Not only that, looking around, Linus felt his entire body weaken as the surroundings turned a deep shade of purple. From Julian's eyes, several hands began to morph, clawing their way out as if they were emerging from the depths of hell itself. It made every hair on his body rise. What sort of skill is this? A heavy sense of dread washed over Linus. It felt as though the hands were reaching for him, trying to drag him into the very hell from which they belonged. His face grew pale and he lost control over his body. He didn't know what was happening, but he could feel the energy within his body get sapped away. Che. On the other hand, Julian's face was twisted in euphoria. His eyes half-lidded as he leaned his head back, reveling in the sensation that was coursing through his body. So this is how it works. His sense of euphoria only grew as he noticed his energy slowly replenish. He finally caught a glimpse of one of his concept's abilities. It allowed him to drain the energy of anyone within its range, replenishing his own in the process. To make matters better, Julian knew this was far from the full ability of his concept. There was still more to unravel. Cage. Snapping him out of his state was Linus, who grew limp over his arm. In spite of that, he still showed signs of struggle. It pissed Julian off as he raised his left fist and smashed it on his face. Bang. Don't bother resisting. Just stay still. You should already be used to the difference in our strength. Things aren't that much different to how they were in the past. All Linus could do was glare at him. I shouldn't have come here. If only he didn't have to hand him over the letter. Linus clenched his teeth tightly. He had grown used to getting beat up by his own brother. This little pain was nothing to him. He was already prepared for what was to come as he simply closed his eyes and waited for his brother to do his thing. But, oh, look at you. Julian released his grip over his throat. Opening his eyes again, Linus saw Julian sitting on the chair opposite, his legs crossed. What? He was a little taken aback by the situation. Is that it? He's not going to hit me? I'm going to kill you. Linus' chest pressed tightly. Lifting his head to directly stare at him, Linus swallowed deeply. He wasn't joking. He could feel it. An overwhelming sense of dread caused the very hair on his body to rise, making his legs falter. You're out of your mind. We're within academy grounds. And if Fath, what about father? Julian cut Linus off. Do you really think he would care if one of us dies? Julian let out a small laugh. The two of us know what kind of person our father is. Your death will be meaningless to him. On the other hand, turning his head, Julian spotted a newspaper lying on the wooden desk. He grabbed it and carelessly tossed it onto the ground. Plaque. Linus lowered his head and cast a brief glance over the headline of the paper. The rise of the twin stars of the Ivinus family. Unlike you, I have worth. He won't care if I kill you. Why would he care if my worth is more than yours? He's already lost one son. What would it matter if he lost two? But the academy? Who even cares if they find out? What are they going to do? Expel me? Julian laughed once again, his face slowly starting to twist. I've already lost everything. Although I have control now, who is to say I will lose it again? Soon? If that's the case, I may as well just burn everything down in order to make it so he won't bother coming back. What are you? Linus looked lost. He couldn't understand a single word his brother was saying. I have control now? He won't bother coming back? Just what was he talking about? Noticing his confusion, Julian didn't bother explaining. His thought process was simple. If he couldn't find a way to take his body black completely, then he planned on destroying everything the parasite had built so far so that he would regret ever taking his body. But before any of that happened, he had to see if he could fully take control of his body. That mirror thing. He'll have to look for it. Lowering his head to stare at his brother, Julian waved his hand. Get out of my sight. Linus didn't say a thing and blinked his eyes. Didn't he just say he would kill him? Are you not leaving? You aren't? Oh, is it because I told you I would kill you? I was joking. You don't need to. Take it seriously. As if a switch had been flipped, Julian's expression softened, transforming into something friendly. The wild look that had consumed him moments ago faded, and his eyes squinted with a calm, almost disarming warmth. He almost looked like a completely different person. However, Linus didn't fall for it. He just stared at Julian, who sat on the opposite end with his eyes slowly shifting from purple to their usual hazel hue. He could tell that he was no longer planning on killing him. Linus didn't feel any relief. This hadn't been the first time he had displayed such behavior in the past. Usually, whenever something like this happened, Julian would tend to do something big. Made Linus grow alarmed. However, he didn't want to stay any longer. Just being in front of him felt suffocating. 11. Without saying a single word, Julian helped himself up. He glanced at Julian one last time, before staggering out. His lip was bleeding and his entire body was weak, but he was nonetheless alive. And that was all that mattered. At least now he was sure. He had to grow stronger. Whatever the consequences were, he had to grow stronger. Only, then would he be able to kill his brother, even if it cost his own life. Clank. The room plunged into silence shortly after he left. Julian emptily stared at the door before his face twisted and he whispered, "Get the fuck out. Get the foo." His words stopped halfway. Gradually, his eyes changed and his expression eased. Looking around the room, Julian glanced around the room and settled his gaze on the mirror that stood on the opposite end of him. Staring at it directly, his eyes slowly started to turn purple. His expression morphed into one of surprise and shock. What in the world is this? Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 421. An Unexpected Gain 2. The mana inside of my body drained. Staring at the reflection in the mirror, I didn't know what to make out of the sight that greeted me. In particular, those purple eyes of mine. What sort of? I closed my eyes to feel my concept. However, I was shocked when I realized that I wasn't using it. Instead, there was something else within my mind. Something more sinister. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my chest. Though it wasn't intense, it left me slightly breathless, and I noticed my body felt unusually weak. The muscles in my arms and legs trembled subtly as my vision felt slightly blurry. I frowned, trying to understand what had happened. But, at that moment, Pebble appeared, landing softly on the ground and glancing around with curious eyes. "Looks like you got into a fight with someone." A fight? It was then that I noticed as I raised my head. One of the walls bore a large crack, and faint traces of blood stained the floor beneath it. Not far from it was a small paper that read, "The Rise of the Twin Stars of the Ivinus Family." Don't tell me it was Leon? No, if it was Leon, then he would have incapacitated me. Someone else. But who exactly could it be? I scanned the room for any clues that might explain what had happened. It didn't take long before my eyes landed on a letter, neatly placed atop the wooden desk. "This is?" I picked up the letter, turning it over a few times in my hands. It was pristine, untouched, which meant it had likely just arrived. As I flipped it again, my eyes landed on the insignia stamped on the seal. The Ivinus household. Possibility ran through my mind. Julian's younger brother? Or at least someone related to the Ivinus household. The contents were especially important given how the Baron had directly written a letter instead of using a communication device. One wouldn't use a letter unless they wanted the information to be hidden. Communication devices could be spied upon with the right relic. I frowned, gripping the letter tightly. After a quick glance around the room, I sat down, broke the seal, and carefully opened the letter. While I still had more questions about what had happened in the room, I was more curious about its contents. What exactly was so important for the Baron to contact me directly? Opening the letter, my eyes widened. Swoosh. Before I could even process the contents, the letter ignited in my hands, disintegrating into the air in a sudden burst of flame. By the time I snapped out of the shock, I slumped back in the chair, blinking repeatedly, unsure of what to make of it all. I suddenly forgot all about the other Julian and just blankly stared at the ceiling of the room for a good minute before recovering. By the time I did, my gaze fell on the ashes of what used to be a letter. The lingering words from the letter echoed in my mind, making me purse my lips as my throat suddenly felt extremely dry. It has to be a joke, right? And yet, thinking about it now, it made so much sense. Especially when I thought back to how I thought their eyes looked similar. Leon. He was royalty, wasn't he? Wait, I wasn't stalking. Sure you weren't. No, I really wasn't. I was actually looking for you. That would make sense. But then why were you looking at Julian's room? Aoife felt her lip twitch. How could she explain what she saw? No, she could, but could she really? Would Kira even believe her? Aoife ruffled her hair. What? You look constipated? Do you have something to say? You want to borrow my toilet? Bang. Kira and Aoife turned their heads sharply toward the source of the sound, their eyes widening as they saw a figure emerge from Julian's room. His face was ghostly pale, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. He looked around, meeting their gaze before lowering his head and walking past the two of them. Staring at him, Aoife's expression changed while Kira's brows furrowed. He looks familiar, she mumbled in a low voice. Smack. Suddenly recalling, she smacked her fist against her palm. Isn't that Julian's brother? Wait, did the two of them fight or something? His lip looked pretty busted. Maybe, but yeah, that was his brother. Aoife was taken aback by Kira's awareness. She typically seemed so indifferent to such matters. In fact, Aoife doubted Kira could recall the names of more than 10 people in their own class. For her to remember felt so creepy. Aoife winced as she hugged her shoulders. As if noticing her reaction, Kira lowered her head and frowned at her. What is the name of the student that sits next to you? Someone sits next to me? See? Aoife hugged her shoulders again. Goosebumps. Fuck off. Annoyed, Kira raised her hand in preparation to smack her when Aoife's face changed. Abruptly halting, Aoife turned her attention to the far end of the corridor. There she spotted a small lock of black hair peeking around the corner. As if sensing her gaze, the figure flinched, and then vanished from sight. What the? Taken aback, Aoife didn't know how to react. Kira's gaze didn't make things easier for her. It didn't seem like she had noticed the lock of black hair like she did. Aoife was just about to explain herself when the door to Julian's room opened and the two of them turned their heads at the same time. Sensing their gaze, Julian turned his head and met their eyes. Aoife held her breath for a few seconds until Julian shifted his attention towards Kira. His expression showed subtle changes the moment he stared at her. Just as his lips parted, open to speak, he held himself back and walked past the two of them. "I'll see you later." These were the last words he said before disappearing out of their sight. Kira and Aoife stared at his departing back for a few seconds before looking at each other. Kira mumbled first while Aoife kept her attention fixed on Julian. He appeared to be the usual Julian, a stark contrast to the one she had witnessed moments earlier when he dragged his brother into the room. Yet, remembering the condition his brother had been in when he left, Aoife felt uncertain about what to make of the situation. Unfortunately, she didn't have too much time to dwell on the situation as she yet again caught a lock of black hair in the distance. Her expression stiffened at the sight. She glanced back in the direction where she had first noticed the lock of black hair before refocusing her gaze toward the front. Aoife's brows furrowed tightly. When did? Candles danced in the dim room, their flickering light casting shadows as the fragrant scent of incense wafted through the air. His face was calm and the room was quiet. He basked in the heavy scent of incense that lingered in the room before finally opening his eyes and looking down at the small shadows that wiggled beneath him. It's almost time. He could sense his target's every movement, and right about now one had started to move. I should start with the one I need to kill first. That was his current priority. Capturing someone was a lot easier than killing them. For that reason, he planned on killing his target first before capturing his other target and fleeing. The priest wore ordinary white robes, and as he stood up and left the premises of the room, coming out wearing one of the academy uniforms, his face and expression were completely different than back when he was in the room. He looked like a regular cadet. A moment later, a figure dressed in white priest robes, identical to the ones he had worn moments earlier, stepped out from behind the room. Even his face and expression were the same. They exchanged brief glances before parting ways. Without drawing much attention, both slipped into the crowd that had gathered for the confessional hearing. From a distance, a pair of eyes darted back and forth between the priest and the cadet before moving towards the priest. Flop. As the owl darted in the direction of the priest, the cadet turned around and looked in the owl's direction, the corner of its lips curling up faintly. The confessional hearing was the main event of the gathering. It was when the cadets would have an unknown talk with the priests, talking about their sins and goals with them. Just like the mass, it was compulsory and Julian couldn't afford to miss it, especially not when he had already missed the mass. More importantly, the earlier he got there, the better for him. It would mean he wouldn't have to wait long before getting it over with. Pebble walked next to him, jumping on top of his shoulders before disappearing from sight. The academy was rather crowded at this time, and Julian merely took a glance at his surroundings before changing direction and deciding to take a different road to the confessional hearing. The road he took was deserted, with no one around. No one was present besides a single cadet who walked in the opposite direction. Julian frowned at the sight of the cadet. Something is off. For some strange reason, alarm bells were going in his mind and his steps slowed down. What's going on? Then, lifting his head to stare into the distance, his pupils constricted. Before he knew it, the world around him had turned dark. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 422. Trap 1. Without thinking much, Julian kicked the ground and dashed back, narrowly avoiding the thin black film that threatened to swallow him whole in just a few seconds. At that moment, Johann, with his curly brown hair, had a peculiar look on his face as he tilted his head. No, you don't. He brought his hand forward, stopping Julian mid-motion. His movements were smooth. By the time Johann's hand raised, Julian came to an abrupt halt and his body propelled into the void that surrounded Johann. Swoosh. In the otherwise quiet surroundings, a sudden gust of wind carried an unsettling scent, thick with a hint of bloodlust. Julian felt himself being pulled into a void of blackness as if crossing the threshold into another world. It slowly enveloped Julian from all sides, shrouding his world in black. Julian looked around in horror. The power to completely fill the surroundings. This was no materialization. This was a full-blown domain. The darkness wrapped itself around Julian like a suffocating shroud, sending chills through his mind and veins. His body stiffened as a result, overwhelmed by the density of mana around him. Something tried to dig at his mind, but Julian was able to remain relatively calm, locking his emotions down at just the right moment. With this, he was able to avoid the first danger. Johann appeared on the opposite end. His face looked calm, as though he had expected Julian to come out unscathed. Facing the paralyzed Julian, Johann sliced the void and Julian felt a cold and invisible chill head for his waist. Julian's blinked, his eyes turning red. The muscles in his body popped and squirmed as he freed himself from the cold sensation and he tensed his back, thrusting his fist forward. Boom! The void around Julian trembled violently, distorting reality. His pupils reflected the alternating flashes of the Academy Road and the void as it tried to repair itself. A trickle of something warm slid down the side of Julian's mouth as he locked eyes with the man standing before him. The man's curly brown hair and simple smile gave off an air of carefree nonchalance, as if he had expected him to react like that. Julian lowered his head, his gaze settling on his fist. A deep, gaping wound marred his knuckles, so severe that he could see the stark white of his bones beneath the torn flesh. This much damage? Shit. Julian's mind went on overdrive, his heart beating intensely. Every hair on his body rose at that moment as he came to a horrifying realization. He's Tier 5, not Tier 4. This piece of information was different from what Atlas had told him. Damn it. Julian didn't have much time to dwell on why his opponent was stronger than he had anticipated. Without holding back, he furiously worked the mana inside of his body, working every muscle and organ to its utmost limit. In the span of a single breath, Julian's eyes shifted from scarlet to green, merging into a brilliant yellow. His frame expanded, muscles surged with power, and his momentum spiked. Without hesitation, his body blurred, closing the distance in an instant as he appeared before Johann, driving his fist forward with overwhelming force, the surrounding voice vacuuming around his fist, allowing him to catch a glimpse of the outside world. Swoosh! In that instant, Johann's deep blue eyes darkened to pitch black, and the surrounding void seemed to ripple like fabric, coiling around Julian's fist. Julian half expected the attack to be some sort of way for his opponent to absorb the brunt force of his attack. But he was wrong. No. The moment the void wrapped around his body, Julian felt the familiar chill digging into his body, and the power of his fist slowed down. Julian's eyes flickered and he clenched his teeth tightly. He exerted every little power within his body. Boom! A muffled explosion echoed through the surroundings, the void rippling violently in response to the sheer force of the impact. The noise was well contained within the dark voice, preventing it from spilling to the outside world. Still, a few more sensitive people noticed the strange peculiarities. Go, tell the security to check out the situation. On it. The voice slowly started to rebuild itself back up. Julian stood in the center, but he could hardly move a single step. His chest was heaving up and down repeatedly while the skin of his fist was torn off, exposing more of his body. His clothes were in tatters, while his hair was a mess. To make matters worse, his thigh had a deep gash over it that started to bleed out onto the ground beneath. Reflection. Julian's expression tightened as he stared at the black fabric covering Johann. Drip. Blood trickled onto the ground as he took several deep breaths. Julian's expression remained composed in spite of the situation. The locks in his emotions, in particular, fear, rattled wildly as he forcefully stopped the emotion from clouding his mind. The situation was severe. His opponent, he was stronger than him. Johann's expression showed a subtle change, his squinted eyes opening slightly. Without any delay, he brought his hands together, twisting the space around Julian. In an instant, everything returned to normal, the void repairing itself as though it had been there from the start. Julian, however, felt the weight of exhaustion crash over him like a wave. It was as if all his power and mental strength had been drained at once. His vision blurred, and a heavy drowsiness began to cloud his mind, pulling him deeper into a haze of fatigue. 11. Julian felt his heart squeeze, and he forcefully bit his tongue, awakening him from the drowsiness. Unfortunately, he had lost precious time doing so. Johann had already started his next attack, his lower leg pulsing faintly, exposing what appeared to be a small bone. Immediately after, he thrust his hand forward. A strong and powerful wing gale shot forth, sending Julian scattering back as cuts appeared, all over his clothes and skin. Since the start of the ambush, Johann didn't give Julian a single moment to breathe. His goal was simple: to end the fight as soon as possible. Since the start of it all, only a few seconds had elapsed. Tensing his right arm, a faint glow appeared over the palm of Johann's hand, reflecting a red bone. Fire erupted from out of his hand, and he immediately shot it in Julian's direction. Swoosh! It covered the entire void, engulfing it in bright, raging flames. The flames danced within Julian's pupils as they grew bigger by the second, but Julian's expression remained calm. Unknowingly, the chains that were sealing his emotions had shattered, and he was simply remaining calm without the help of the spell he had created. He then brought his hand forward as it slowly changed color and lifted it up. Swoosh! Over a dozen hands protruded from the ground, completely engulfing and sealing Johann. The flames that were headed Julian's way extinguished rather quickly after that. The world became dark once more. CR crack. That was until the hands shattered, revealing Johann, who looked slightly pale. In spite of that, his clothes were undamaged and his hair was still well kept. Huff, huff. Julian felt his heart sink at the scene. However, he still remained composed as he closed his eyes. His mind clouded with the image of a battlefield, a nightmarish scene filled with blood-soaked earth and countless corpses strewn about like broken dolls. The gruesome vision fueled his rage, igniting something deep within him as his breathing became heavier, his gaze growing more intense. Rage, Julian mumbled, pressing his hand over his forearm. His chest boiled and his head felt light. Immediately, the muscles in his body expanded further, and further power accumulated in his body. A faint, tingling sensation accompanied the increase in power, but Julian ignored it. Increasing size and power? Johann merely shook his head and swiped at the air. He was already aware of Julian's power and, thus he understood how it worked. The more he felt an emotion, the more powerful his power was. Still, in Johann's eyes, what Julian was doing was counterproductive. What was the point of turning into this raging hunk of meat if he couldn't even hit him? Pity flashed across his eyes as he watched his attack move towards Julian. His attack blended nicely with the dark surroundings, preventing Julian from properly seeing. Soon enough, the attack came, cleaving his entire body in two. Swoosh! HM? Johann's brows immediately furrowed tightly upon seeing Julian's body severed in two. It was then that he understood, but it was too late. Materializing a few meters away from him, a pair of hazel eyes met his sight. Fear. A powerful voice drummed in his mind, forcing his face to go pale and his legs to grow numb. For a brief moment, he lost complete control of his body. Opportunity. Without any consideration for his body, Julian pressed his arm over his forearm and muttered two words at the same time: joy, rage. Unlike last time, he did this for real. Julian's body swelled unnaturally, the strain causing the muscles in his legs to tear with audible snaps. Blood seeped from the deep cuts that marked his skin, each movement exacerbating the pain. Blinking, a pink orb appeared in his mind. Julian's muscles tightened considerably and the bleeding came to a sudden stop. His fist, already mangled and barely holding together, stiffened at just the right time. Yet, despite the excruciating agony, he remained focused. Swoosh! He shot towards Johann, who was just snapping out of it. Ah! In the instant that he recovered, Johann stepped back, the void wrapping around him like a black blanket. That was when Julian's fist came forward and directly smashed against it. Thump! A muffled sound echoed. Arc! Julian let out a guttural scream, his voice echoing through the surroundings as his fist twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood poured from the mangled hand, seeping from every crack and wound, staining the dark void beneath. His attack, it had been directly reflected on him. Cage. Julian gritted his teeth in spite of the pain. Staring at Johann, who could only see his eyes, he pressed his foot against the ground. Swoosh! The gravity around the two intensified, and the dark blanket surrounding Johann fell onto the ground, exposing his body. But that no longer mattered to Johann as he managed to regain his bearing. Staring at Julian, who was now very close to him, Johann flicked his hand up, causing Julian's already broken arm to twist once more. He half expected Julian to scream or show an opening, but in response to his actions, he got nothing. Julian's face was like a block of ice. Fear. Once more, a voice fell down on his mind, drumming loudly within it. It left him paralyzed for a split second, and that was all Julian needed as he flicked his other hand. A faint purple magic circle shot directly towards Johann, who didn't have enough time to dodge. His vision grew blurry, and he started to feel sleepy. This realization quickly dawned on Johann, who bit his tongue and forced his eyelids open. By the time he snapped out of it, Julian was already upon him, mustering every bit of his strength and completely ignoring the pain that invaded every part of his body. He pushed forward and pounced on Johann. At that moment, there was nothing in his mind. He relied solely on his experiences and judgment. This was not the same as the tournament. Any mistake could prove fatal. There was no one that was supervising him this time. If he didn't act quickly, he was going to die. He couldn't die. No, I won't die. Julian's mind shook as his momentum grew, completely overwhelming Johann, who for the first time showed signs of panic. Staring at his bloodthirsty opponent, fear seeped into the deepest parts of his mind. An artificial fear. One that came from the very depths of his soul and was not forced upon him. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 423. Trap 2. Julian's growing momentum started to give rise to a natural fear in Johann's mind as he hurriedly circulated his mana, extracting every little bit of power in his body. Pop. Johann's muscles popped and cracked, his shirt ripping apart and his eyes turning bloodshot. The void that surrounded him shrunk exponentially, wrapping around his arm tightly. Then he threw a punch, one that sucked the void around them, exposing the outside world again. Johann was very confident that anyone beneath Tier 5 couldn't defend and take on his punch. If his opponent took on the punch directly, all his power would be reflected back to him directly, shattering every inch of his bones, or even worse. Yes, come. His excitement only grew when he noticed Julian prepping up to meet his own fist. Boom. Julian's fist clashed directly with Johann's. CRA crack. Accompanying the explosive sound was a cracking noise as Julian's other arm shattered. Blood seeped out from his mouth as his hand recoiled back. In a physical matchup, Julian came out beneath. But that was fine, because he was never there to begin with. Johann's eyes widened in shock as he watched Julian's body morph into what appeared to be a large chunk of the pavement, which exploded into thousands of fragments, torn apart by the sheer impact of his fist. Panic surged in Johann's eyes. Swoosh. Lips parting, he turned around to see Julian's figure appear right behind him. Johann clenched his teeth and opened up his palm, thrusting it in Julian's direction. Swoosh. Fire erupted, shooting directly at Julian. To Johann's shock and pleasant surprise, Julian didn't dodge. The fire engulfed Julian's body directly, only showing faint traces of his burning silhouette. Johann's heart jolted all of a sudden. Feeling a faint presence coming from behind, he didn't hesitate to turn around once more and once again thrust his hand in the opposite direction. It was another illusion. He clenched his teeth. Just as he turned and unleashed the flames in the opposite direction, his heart sank in horror. A pair of eyes were locked on him, cold, deep, and indifferent, as though he were nothing more than an insignificant speck. But most importantly, they seemed to belong to a cat. Before Johann could understand what was happening, a pair of burned hands emerged from behind him, grasping at his mouth and neck. A hot breath ran down Johann's neck as Julian's lips parted. Sadness. Johann suddenly felt an overwhelming tension building in his chest, intensifying with every second that passed, growing heavier and more suffocating. Stop, stop, stop. The more the sensation swelled, the more Johann felt his head throb. Bam, bam. It was as if someone was hammering his mind with a sledgehammer, increasing the power with each swing. Bam, bam. It took his breath away, stopping any words from coming out of his mouth. He could only shout for Julian to stop in his mind. Stop, stop. But Julian couldn't hear his thoughts. How could he? Right at this very moment, tears were streaming down his slightly burned face while his hand trembled as he felt slight tremors of pain run down his body. The pain was intense, and it was this pain that stopped him from regulating his powers. He just continued to pour his emotions into Johann, who started to tremble. Stop. Make it stop. His eyes started to turn white. The pain in his mind reached levels where he stopped thinking. His entire body started to spasm, trashing and squirming in Julian's arms. There was something clearly wrong with him, but Julian didn't notice it. He thought that he was still struggling, so he injected more, and bang. Julian felt a warm splash of liquid hit his face. He didn't register what had happened until the body he had been cradling slipped from his grasp and thudded to the ground. Thud. Julian lowered his head to look at his arms, which were covered in blood. Beneath him, a headless corpse appeared, still leaking blood. That was when it all registered in his mind, and he took a step back, his muscles faltering due to exhaustion. He tried his best to resist, but even then, his body failed him. Thud. Julian fell down on his butt. 11. He was exhausted, and yet he was breathing normally. His mind was so numb that he could only just faintly process what had happened. All he knew was that the entire fight had lasted no longer than half a minute at best. It was incredibly quick. But he had killed a Tier 5, someone who had developed a domain. Blankly staring at the headless corpse in front, Julian's lips trembled. I did that? Emotive magic did that? How? How could? Yucker. Julian felt a sudden throb in his head. It smashed directly at his mind, almost as though a heavy hammer had directly pounded against it. It felt excruciating. Julian flinched and hurriedly shifted his attention towards his hand where his ring rested. Tills, he mumbled, channeling the little bit of mana that he had left. Tills, he mumbled again, his consciousness fading. No, he couldn't let his consciousness fade. Not yet. If he did, then he would be in big trouble. He couldn't. Thud. Julian slumped down on the ground, his consciousness fading away, slowly being replaced by another. He clawed the ground, putting up a desperate struggle, but it was futile. He slowly lost consciousness, giving space for another. An eerie silence enveloped the surroundings as Julian lay motionless on the ground for several minutes. Gradually, his eyelids began to twitch. 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 The moment Julian's eyes opened, his expression changed. The Helic. Abruptly sitting up, he winced in pain. Ark. Julian's scream reverberated into the air while he hurriedly scratched his face and arms. Only for the pain to increase further. Fuck, make it stop. Make it stop. Julian tumbled across the ground, writhing in agony with every roll. Each movement only intensified the pain, sending sharp jolts through his body. Cage. He bit down hard on his shirt, muffling the AMS that threatened to stop, make it stop. What did that bastard do? Out of him. He had only lost control for a tiny bit before gaining control of it again. And yet, by the time he regained control, all that met him was pain. Ark. The pain was unbearable, leaving him gasping for air, his chest tightening as though he were suffocating. Each second stretched on, amplifying the agony until it felt unbearable. Stop, Mac. Why aren't you using your pills? A voice suddenly cut through his screams. In his agony, Julian managed to turn his head to see a silhouette staring in his direction. A cat? Its eyes were deep, and standing not far from him, it looked at him with a concerned look. If you take the pills, you should be able to be fine. Pills? What pills? Pills aside, what was this cat? Was it the same as the owl? Another one of the parasites? Pets? No, that didn't matter right now. Where? All he could think about was making the pain stop. Pills? Where? Aren't you supposed to know? Julian clenched his teeth and glared at the cat, who frowned subtly. Then, turning its head, it looked right at Julian's hand. Following its gaze, Julian caught sight of the black ring on his finger. That again? He had noticed it before when the owl looked at it. He didn't pay much attention to it out of caution. But now he didn't have the time to think about being careful. Glaring at the owl, Julian clenched his teeth to suppress his pain before shifting all his attention towards the ring, where he quickly channeled his mana. He wasn't entirely sure what it was for, but judging by its appearance, it seemed like something that could help him acquire the pills he needed. A relic, it must be a relic. Closing his eyes, he channeled his mana into the ring. The instant he activated it, a powerful suction force erupted from the ring, pulling his consciousness out of his body. He didn't even have the time to react before he felt his consciousness get snatched away. A faint breeze swept over the academy grounds, carrying with it the distant sound of approaching footsteps, growing louder with each passing second. Licking its paw, Pebble turned around and entered the bushes, completely fading into one of the many bushes. Russell, my job is done. Shortly after, a few voices echoed. Over here. There's someone over here. Quick. The world was white. In one moment, Julian found himself suffering from excruciating pain, and in the next moment, he found himself within this strange white world. Looking down, he could see his own reflection. He looked completely unharmed. Am not hurt? He didn't feel any of the pain he previously felt. In fact, he felt incredible. However, the ecstasy didn't last for very long. Frowning, Julian looked around. All he could see was Wittian endless stretch of white. Where am I? Where are the pills? How do I get out? It was eerily quiet around him. All Julian could hear was the faint echo of his own voice. Hey, he shouted at the top of his lungs, his anger starting to accumulate. What am I supposed to do? Anyone? Julian's eyes darted around, his brows furrowing even more. Memories of the past year flooded back, making his chest tighten with unease. He felt trapped again. No, not again. Just as he was about to speak, the ground beneath him rippled unnaturally, sending a cold shiver up his spine. Before he could react, Julian felt his feet sink into the ground, sending ripples radiating outward. What the? Julian squirmed and tried to free his legs, but it was useless. Everything he did only made him sink faster. Irk. Slamming his hand against the ground, Julian sent more ripples spreading outward. They stretched endlessly throughout the white world, only coming to a stop when another ripple appeared. Tack. The faint echo of a footstep reverberated, halting Julian for a moment as a shadow cast over his body. As he raised his head, his eyes grew wide at the sight that greeted him. This really was quite difficult to set up. A faint voice echoed before he could get his words out. There were quite a few hiccups here and there, but everything went as I planned. This might not fix everything, but I'm sure it'll be able to solve most of my problems for now. It was Emmett who lowered his head to get a closer look at Julian, whose body was sinking deeper into the ground. His stunned expression was a sight to see. You might not be familiar with this place, but it's a very dear place to me. Emmett extended his hands, glancing at the world of white around them. Welcome to the trials of forgotten minds. The mirror. To fix my condition, I needed to use the mirror. The one that Kira was in possession of. Collecting the mirror should have been my priority. I knew that, and yet, when Kira appeared before me, I stopped myself from asking her for it. I understood that it wouldn't be easy to get her to give it to me. It was something precious to her, and I knew she didn't fully trust me yet. But that was fine. I had another thought in mind. While it wasn't a permanent solution, it would help me buy valuable time. It was a bit of a gamble, but what if? What if I used the ring on Julian, the ring of nothingness, as an artifact bound to my soul? One that only I could use it. If anybody tried to use it, they'd be subjected to the trials of forgotten minds that I had undergone in the past. Once someone entered, it was almost impossible to get out. The only problem was whether it would work on Julian, considering that we both shared the same body. There was also the very real risk that it wouldn't work, making everything that I planned go for naught. But it was worth a try. That was when the plan came to fruition. Allow Julian to take over the body. Use Almighty to plant a seed of interest in regards to the ring, as well as an idea of what wills were. Take the body back when the target was ready to come for me. Purposely lure the target into one of the 3 secluded areas that Atlas had mentioned before. Kill the target and get injured in the process. Lure Julian into using the ring to heal himself. And lastly, welcome to the trial of forgotten minds. Have him enter the trial of forgotten minds. Julian's eyes trembled as he stared at me, but once he processed the situation, they turned bloodshot, and he lunged at me. It's you again. Damn you. Not here. I merely took a step to the side and dodged his attack. Julian's face twisted further at that. Planting his foot down, he twisted his torso and punched me again. But like before, I dodged. Swoosh, swoosh. His punches were easy to dodge. They were predictable and weak. I had fought people a lot stronger than him in the past. Furthermore, he was a mage, not a body user. His punches were extremely slow. Ark. Stop dodging. Seeing me dodge every one of his attacks, Julian grew restless. You fucking rat. Stop moving. They'll kill you. His screams reverberated loudly within the world of white. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Pathetic sight. That was how I could describe the situation. It was a pathetic sight. Swoosh. Rat. Despite his curses and punches, I didn't bother to fight back. He just wasn't worth it. Dodging another attack with a quick swoosh, I extended my finger and tapped his forehead lightly. Thud. Julian fell onto the ground. Ark. Saliva spilled from his mouth as he held his throat with both hands. His eyes shook intensely while his body trembled. Help. I felt a tangible fear coming out of his eyes. It only made sense considering how I didn't hold back when touching his forehead. I didn't even give him the courtesy of using my voice. He needed to suffer. However, the fact that his head hadn't exploded was because I held back. Not that he would die. In spite of his fear, Julian continued to glare at me from the ground. Stop. He reached his hand forward, grasping onto my ankle. I looked down to meet his bloodshot and crazed eyes. He looked back at me with an intense hatred. One strong enough to make me understand just how much he wanted to kill me. But at the same time, I could see something else within his eyes. Something like helplessness, right? He looked helpless. From his frail voice to his shaky eyes. My body. Eek. Give it back. It's mine. His grip over my ankle increased. I want it back. For the first time since seeing Julian, I saw hints of despair and helplessness in his eyes. He truly did want to get his body back. He probably couldn't stand being stuck by himself any longer. I understood his pain, but I'm sorry. I snatched my ankle away from his grip. You lost the right to your body the moment I took over it. I have something to do and I need this body for it. You can hate me, but you brought this upon yourself. Julian wasn't a good guy. I had seen firsthand just how unhinged he could be. It was why I felt no sympathy for him. At the same time, I knew this was all an act. But even if it was real, I didn't plan on giving this body back. Not now nor ever. Under the faint breeze of the day, two grayed figures sat quietly on one of the academy benches. The atmosphere between the two held subtle tension as neither party spoke. Leon sat quietly on the bench with his brows furrowed while sneaking glances at Amel's way. He just sat next to Leon with an awkward look while scratching the side of his cheek and thinking of ways to make small talk with him. He would open his mouth from time to time but would close it right after. Leon picked up on all of this and felt weirded out. What is he trying to do? Could it be that he was trying to challenge him again after what had happened in the tournament? Did he find it too awkward to ask for a rematch? Leon scratched the back of his head. This is a bit of a troublesome situation. However, if that truly was the case, Leon didn't plan on outright rejecting the request. Amel was strong, and having a sparring partner like him could prove to be a valuable opportunity, especially one as competent as he was. Right, if I want to be stronger than Julian, I have to do this. Clench. Suddenly thinking about Julian, Leon's fist balled together tightly. Recalling the most recent humiliations that he had suffered at Julian's hands, Leon felt the need to become stronger quickly. He couldn't allow Julian to walk all over him like that. Right, I have to take this opportunity. Taking a deep breath, Leon turned his head to address Amel. Do you But just as Leon turned his head, he was shocked to find that Amel was no longer sitting beside him. He had disappeared without a sound. What? Where did he? Leon's head flicked all around in order to look for Amel, but he was gone. He vanished as swiftly as he had arrived, like the faint breeze that lingered in the air. Leon blinked his eyes, utterly confused by what had happened. Unfortunately, before he could properly understand, he heard the faint sound of wings flapping and an owl appeared next to him. It stared at him in silence, holding onto a round orb in its mouth. A recording device? Leon blinked his eyes and reached his hand forward. This is a recording that will be useful later. Julian asked me to give it to you. Something happened to him and he'll probably be questioned when he wakes up. When that time comes, you can pass this along. It will resolve the entire situation. It's a recording of the target moving in a different direction. Leon looked at the recording device in confusion. No, before that. Something happened to Julian? Yes. Almighty answered in a flat tone, and Leon frowned. What happened? He got attacked. And he won. He won? Yes, but he's injured. Leon took a deep breath. And his opponent? Dead. At the same time, Atlas office. Guard captain. Atlas answered the communication device. Upon hearing the contents of the call, his expression grew more serious. Holding onto the communication device more tightly, his voice lowered. He was assaulted? Atlas pretended to be surprised. However, this was all within his expectations. So he really did take care of the situation. Just as Atlas was feeling proud, the voice continued. Correct. His condition is quite bad. He appears to be in a coma. Coma? CRA crack. Faint miniature cracks formed across the recording device. While on the outside he remained the same, the atmosphere around him changed greatly. We have yet to identify his opponent. His entire head has been blown off. It'll take a while to completely determine his identity. Anything more? Yes. It appears as though the opponent Julian faced was capable of fully creating a domain. I fear he was in the 5th tier. The surroundings suddenly trembled. More cracks appeared on the communication device as Atlas closed his eyes. 5th tier? Are you sure? Yes. The lingering mana traces left on site suggest that to be the case. I see. Atlas nodded his head gently and relaxed his grip on the communication device. He shared a few more words with the guard's captain before he ended the conversation and walked towards the door. Although the windows were closed, the papers settled on his desk scattered while the chandelier swayed. You really wanted him dead, didn't you? Atlas chuckled. He could more or less understand what had happened. While his information was correct, there were a few things that he had neglected to think about, like how threatened Genesis felt by Julian's presence. Indeed, while all the organization belonged to the same person, it wasn't as if their relationship was harmonious. There was competition between the 4 organizations. Everyone wanted to be better than the other to get his attention. It was clear that Julian's presence had left Genesis threatened. He wanted to get rid of him before he'd become someone strong enough to shift the balance between the seats. That was why he had gone so far as to give his subordinate a special pill that boosted his strength significantly, though it came at the cost of shortening his lifespan. It's the only explanation as to why his strength was far higher than I had calculated. And it was also why Julian was able to kill him. While his opponent was in the 5th tier in terms of mana density and quantity, he wasn't fully in the 5th tier. Just shy away from it. That little bit of leeway was probably what made it possible for Julian to kill him. Or maybe not. Julian had given him many surprises in the past. Perhaps, he really could defeat a tier 5 user. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 425. Suspect 1. Haven Medical Facility. How is he doing? Atlas, the chief guard captain, the doctor, and several other professors gathered together outside of the medical ward where Julian was being treated. His conditions are stable. It shouldn't take too long for him to regain consciousness. That's good. One of the professors sighed in relief upon hearing the doctor's evaluation. He was a relatively short professor with balding hair and thick brows. He immediately turned his attention towards the chief guard captain. What happened? How could something like this be under your watch? I'd like to know that too. The chief guard captain replied, his tone extremely serious. It's strange. It's as if we've hit a blind spot. The chief guard captain started to explain. The entire fight lasted probably no longer than half a minute, and by the time the station guards arrived, it was already over. But that's what I find strange. Given their abilities, they should have been able to arrive at the place within several seconds. Furthermore, I find it hard to believe that nobody was able to pick up on the mana traces that were released. Are you suggesting that they were in cahoots with the assailant? The professor asked with doubt in his tone. There were many things that he didn't understand. What was the aim of ambushing Julian? How could it be possible to have the guards in cahoots with the assailant? Just how powerful would they need to be to pull this off? It could also be possible that the assailant used some sort of device to hide his mana traces for long enough to delay the guards' reactions. Atlas spoke softly as he reclined in one of the metal chairs, leaning back comfortably with his eyes half closed. The chief guard captain looked at him for a brief second before nodding faintly. That's also another possibility. We're still investigating. This is what we have for now. I'll inform you once we have more ideas on the situation. For now, we're sealing all information from leaking. It would be best if the public doesn't know of this information for now, especially since there's an important event happening right now. I'm in agreement. Atlas faintly nodded his head, his half-opened eyes closing. It was then that he asked, do you have any ideas as to who the possible assailant is? A strange silence followed after Atlas' question. It was enough to make him open his eyes, revealing his deep yellow pupils. Meeting his gaze was the guard's captain, a man with thick black brows, deep-set brown eyes, and short, jet-black hair. A long scar ran down the side of his face, adding to his menacing appearance. In spite of his appearance, his presence was still completely overwhelmed by the warm-looking Atlas. The captain swallowed silently before speaking. We still don't know which side is the assailant. All we know is that a fight occurred. We don't know which side was responsible for the ambush. The room seemed to freeze as a powerful tension descended, thick and stifling. Atlas and the guard captain locked eyes, neither flinching. Despite the eerie calm in Atlas' gaze, there was an unmistakable intensity. It was as if the sun itself burned behind his eyes, a fire raging just beneath the surface, threatening to consume everything it looked at. His lips parted open, his voice gently echoing out. Are you suggesting that Julian is the one who assaulted? I am not. I'm merely suggesting it's a possibility, the captain said, his tone even. Considering that the other person involved has shown strength approaching the 5th tier, it's unlikely Julian can defeat him outright with his current level of power. The only plausible way I can think of is through an ambush. Atlas directly cut off the captain, a thin smile spreading across his lips. The tension that lingered in the room subsided as his eyes closed again. Well, I see. Your words make sense. We can't immediately jump to conclusions. Do you have any possible idea as to who the other person involved is? We have some ideas. I'm sorry, but we won't be disclosing for now. We'll do so once we are certain about their identity. It's standard protocol. Understandable. Atlas appeared to be rather agreeable. After those words from the captain, he no longer asked any questions and the surroundings fell silent. That was until the doctor frowned and thought, what about the Chancellor? It's strange that she isn't here. Do you know where she is? The Chancellor? Raising his brow, the captain mused for a brief moment. Now that I think about it, I've already relayed the information to her. Given that she isn't here, she most likely ignored it or hasn't seen it yet. I'm not sure which one it is. Opening his eyes, Atlas glanced toward the room where Julian was resting. As he did, a faint crack appeared on his otherwise calm expression. It was subtle, but not enough for anyone to notice. Staring directly at the wall, he let out a subtle breath before closing his eyes again. Maybe I'm just seeing things. Yeah, maybe he was. The academy was rather efficient. All news related to Julian's accident was completely sealed, preventing anyone from figuring out what had happened. Given how fast the situation had also been, and how secluded the area was, no rumors circulated across the academy campus. However, an incident did occur. One of the priests, Priest Johann Persia of the Chlora Church, went missing. Given that he was one of the priests responsible for conducting the confessional hearing for the Church of Chlora, this situation quickly escalated into a significant issue. As a result, all confessional hearings were immediately put on hold. One of the priests went missing? Yeah, that's what they said. How does that make sense? Aoife came out of the dorm rooms with Kira. The two were just about to head over to the confessional hearings when its cancellation was suddenly announced. There wasn't much information regarding why it was cancelled besides the fact that one of the priests had gone missing. The entire academy was now looking for the man in question. Aoife turned to look at Kira. What do you think? How should I know? Kira shrugged, a licorice stick hanging by her lips. Nibbling on the stick, she casually looked around before taking it out. I don't really mind, to be honest. I'm not really into this stuff. I might as well do other things. If anything, this is just saving me time. Aoife didn't refute her statement. She had been at a confessional hearing in the past, and it was rather boring. All they would do was talk with one of the priests and share some embarrassing secrets before repenting to the gods. In her eyes, it was a total waste of time. The fact that it got delayed was good in her eyes. Well, to some extent. Even so, it's not like it's cancelled. We'll still have to attend it soon enough. Yeah. Kira clicked her tongue while mumbling, fucking annoying bullshit. Lifting her head to gaze at the sky, she casually flicked the licorice stick aside. Aoife frowned but decided to ignore it. While it was littering, it was also just a stick. Plus, she could already imagine what would happen if she started to nag at her. And so, Aoife decided to remain quiet. She wasn't in the mood to fight with Kira. At least not now. Perhaps later. These thoughts ran down her mind until her eyes caught sight of a faint lock of hair peeking from one of the trees in the distance. Aoife's brows furrowed tightly. Again? No, the hair color is different. The hair looked red. Red? Aoife looked to her right where Kira was. She half expected her to notice something, but she just seemed lost in her own world. When Aoife turned to look at the tree once more, the lock of hair was gone. Aoife stood quietly for a brief moment before walking ahead. Surely, I'm not seeing things right? Aoife's head flicked to the left. That was when she felt a presence and she immediately dashed in that direction. Her abrupt actions caught Kira's attention as she looked surprised. What is this by swoosh? But before Kira could finish her words, Aoife jumped into one of the bushes and shouted, "Got you." She pulled out a bunch of sticks and leaves. A strange silence followed suit shortly after that. Turning her head, Aoife saw Kira look at her with widened eyes. Her expression seemed to say, "Has this bitch totally lost it?" Aoife tried her best to ignore Kira's expression and shifted her attention back to the sticks and bushes in her hand. I could have sworn I had caught something. It just disappeared before she could fully grasp it. But what could it be? Aoife's brows tightened considerably. She had been feeling a presence ever since the dorm rooms before. And yet, whenever she tried to investigate, she would find nothing. Just what sort of, A certain high-pitched voice snapped and caught Aoife's attention. Lifting her head, Aoife noticed a figure appearing in the distance. Her purple locks danced under the faint breeze that lingered in the air, and her expression appeared troubled as she reached out from behind one of the trees. Before Aoife could comprehend the reason behind Evelyn's troubled expression, her mouth fell when she saw Evelyn pull out her hand from behind the tree, holding onto a small hand. Soon, a small head peeked out from behind the tree, revealing a young girl with soft red hair, wide watery eyes, and chubby, rosy cheeks. A kid? The sight left Aoife stumped. How could a kid appear in the academy of all places? Aoife couldn't understand what was happening at all. To add insult to injury, a sudden hot, searing pain flared up in her right arm. When she glanced down, her heart skipped a beat. A faint glow manifested from within her skin. In there, she could see her bone. It glowed a faint red hue. Aoife's mouth opened and closed several times as she struggled to process the sight before her. She knew exactly what it was, but that very fact that she knew made her mind grow blank. How? Aoife's lips trembled as she took a step back, staring at her hand, and then the little girl in the distance with whom she suddenly felt a connection. Aoife's chest shook. Taking a step back, she pressed her hand against her arm. It felt hot and information flowed into her mind. It really is a bone. But when? When did I receive the bone? And who exactly was the kid in front of her?